high fiber diet. What is a high fiber diet? What is a low fiber diet? And how do we navigate fiber in IBD? This is one of the questions we get quite often is how do we navigate a very important gut-friendly tool that we have that is complicated in IBD? So let's dive in and talk about it. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Christa.
And we're the Crohn's and Colitis Dietitians. We're here to make it a little bit easier to navigate nutrition information online. And yeah, so fiber. So when I was first diagnosed, I don't know about you, Christa, but I just stuck to anything low fiber because that's what I was reading online.
Bland and low fiber.
Yeah, low fiber, bland as it can get. And oftentimes people just aren't given a lot of guidance around how to navigate eating in general with IBD, nutrition for IBD, so there's a lot of question marks. And so when I started out, I was definitely just gravitating towards minimal on everything because I was very symptomatic. But the more that I delve into IBD nutrition and really understanding the microbiome and how important fiber is, the more that I've completely changed my mind about it and just started encouraging other people to make sure that they're getting fiber because it's such a key, I think of it as a nutrient in itself because of what it produces. So on its own, it's not when we look at it, it's not something we absorb, but then when it hits the gut is when we reap all the benefits.
Yes, and that's so different than what we hear online, right? Like everybody is kind of either afraid of it or they're actively saying to not have it because we don't absorb it, but we know that because of that lack of absorption, that's what's creating these beautiful short-chain fatty acids and conferring a benefit to us.
Yeah, so we are in a wave right now with the carnivore diet, and with the carnivore diet also came this idea, and a lot of people on podcasts with, oftentimes no nutrition knowledge or education around fiber and nutrition in general, saying that fiber does not matter and that because we don't digest it, that we don't need it. And on the surface, it seems true, but when you actually understand the science behind what's happening, that's not the case. Fiber is very important for when it comes to gut health and when it comes to IBD outcomes. We definitely see a lot of research around that. We've talked about it a lot on here as well.
And it can be scary with, there's roughage related to it. Sometimes it can kind of tickle the intestines, and sometimes that's not very comfortable, or there might be a fear of a stricture or obstruction. So there's genuine fear that is that's a real thing, and that's something that we want to consider. But we also want to weigh that with what we know to be true of fiber and it providing really, really helpful and beneficial things for us.
Yeah, you're so right. So if you're somebody that's a little bit afraid about fiber, that makes you nervous, you're not alone. I would say pretty much every patient that we have, almost all across the board, I'd say 95% is a pretty realistic number, come to us afraid of fiber or eating minimal fiber because of either what they've been told or because they actually get symptoms with it, which is also very common. It's very common for people to experience some symptoms, especially in the early phases of introduction to it and all of that. So yeah, you can get symptoms with it, but that alone does not necessarily mean that you're getting inflammation or causing harm.
Yeah. And when we say what is a low fiber diet, what would you qualify as low fiber?
That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about it. I think low residue is really the commonly discussed. You know what? Let's look right now. How
in the nutrition care manual that you would get, the handouts at the hospital that a dietitian would give you, low fiber would either be, there's two levels. You could either have 13 grams a day, and then even lower than that would be 8 grams a day. And that is really challenging to do.
Really challenging. That's Okay, I did Google it not because I don't know, but I do like to I always like to check myself a little bit because, things change and, new research comes out all the time. But anyways, I think that what I had in my head was 5 to 15, just because
5 to 15, yeah.
That's what I had in my head. Now, I think I think most of what that is defined as, or how most people would view it, is 10 to 15 range is like low residue.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like what they'll often recommend right before colonoscopy too, if you're
True.
somebody that has trouble clearing out. But
well, and I
yes.
just looked at the nutrition care manual for a patient of ours because we had someone coming out of surgery and we were trying to figure out like how to reintroduce and progress through, to a more normal dietary fiber intake. And I was just curious, and so I clicked on low fiber, and it had it at 13 grams and then 8. Those were 2 options.
Yeah, and honestly, that's so low. And
really low.
It may be necessary in some scenarios for people to be on low fiber, low residue. But keep in mind too, even if you're someone that has strictures and maybe obstruction prone, there are always workarounds too with fiber too that we can consider and play around with if you're working with a dietitian, like blending and texture modification and the type of fiber, because we don't often consider the type of fiber as a part of the conversation, but it is important.
And what's interesting, if you think just the average US American, the average fiber intake is 10 to 15 grams, and that is a low fiber diet.
Isn't that interesting? It really is interesting, because I think a lot of people stress over it when they're like, oh, I have to go low residue and low fiber. But the likelihood is you're already on a low fiber diet and a low residue diet, just based on statistics alone.
Yeah.
But, and so with IBD, like one of the things that we help people with is helping people expand their diet and slowly improve their tolerance to things over time. So we're working on bringing up those numbers, getting more diversity in the diet overall. With doing that, you naturally move towards hitting more of the recommended amount, 20 to 30 grams. I think you don't even have to focus that much on counting. I think you can just kind of trust that diversity is going to be the thing that we need the most. But something that I think was interesting recently is I was looking at topics we could explore around fiber. I noticed that one of the top Googled things is, what is a high fiber diet?
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting because there's not really a standard for that. It's just kind of whatever you think it is. Obviously over the average is what I would assume that would mean.
Yeah, now that we're talking about it, I do remember looking at that because there was an option in the care manual for that too. And it was closer to like 45 to 50 grams was considered high. And we just recorded a podcast on this. Like if you're someone who has higher caloric needs, that would be like the baseline for you, if we're increasing needs. So
yeah, for athletes, their norm goes up as calories go up. So then high fiber for normal, not active, maybe not as active person is going to be different for normal for very active person.
Yeah. I was just thinking it's interesting because it takes a really personalized approach, because you have to decide, just making sure that you're not displacing other calories or other macronutrients based on your fiber intake, whether that be too high or too low. So, obviously a lot of the times that general recommendation of 25 to 30 grams is usually like, an okay target, but it does usually take some effort to kind of make sure that we're not displacing other things.
Yeah, for sure. And it can take a little bit of time for people to build up. But I think in the very beginning, it can be useful to sort of track or have in mind how to bring in fiber. And then once you kind of get going, you get into the habit of understanding, oh yeah, can throw in a kiwi here and some oatmeal here and reach that target pretty easily.
I don't know about you, but I love when I get a little overwhelmed with it or just unsure of how to go about it. I like the challenge of 30 different plants per week, right? Isn't that
30 different
challenge?
Yeah. And that's from an actual study that it was the largest microbiome study ever done. And they looked at the best microbiomes. What do they have in common? And it's that they're including 30 different types of fruits and veggies. So it's the diversity piece that is actually key to gut health and the health of your microbiome, which is so interesting too, because I do find that the struggle with IBD patients is often We want to stay with our safe foods, and we want to stay in the same realm all the time, the things that we know are safe. And so you end up eating a lot of the same things because you're just in that safety zone of trying to, prevent symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we have a lot of tricks up our sleeve to kind of help manage that and help increase safely and with more tolerance, which is our specialty, what we help with the most.
Yeah. Before we end, do you have a favorite high fiber food, or moderately to favorite?
Well, I'm usually trying to tick off more than one box. And I love that edamame does that for me. It's high protein and it's high fiber.
Nice.
And that is like a go-to for me and my kiddos.
That fits your personality so much because you're very efficient and practical. She is the one to go to for if that's what you're after. Very good at that. For me, what I'm really loving right now, mine changes all the time, but what I'm loving is chia seeds.
Yes.
Chia seed pudding in particular, which is also higher protein than I thought.
Yeah.
3 tablespoons, 7 grams of protein, which is, I think, more than we think. And then you can pair that with, I will throw some soy milk in there and let it just become a pudding. And then you have, almost 20 grams of protein in a snack plus
and it's
your
so
chia
versatile.
seed.
I love that.
Yeah, and your omega-3s too.
So many boxes.
So many boxes. All right, everybody. I hope that was helpful for you, us breaking down what a low fiber and high fiber diet is and giving you some of our favorites. And if you need some support or help, please reach out. We are taking patients again. So reach out and set up an appointment to have a call and figure out which program is right for you.